Sonny Dykes lands one more player to wrap up his best recruiting class as TCU's head coach.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. We cover TCU athletics for the past 12 years. We're brought to you today by Gametime. If you need tickets for the Super Bowl or any other big event, check out Gametime today. Download that app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. TCU basketball on Wednesday night. The men took down West Virginia. Jamie Dixon gets win number 500. The women, well, they missed a big opportunity by falling to Kansas State on the road in Manhattan. We'll cover that later on the show. But we start today with wrapping up the 2025 recruiting class. TCU had a defensive lineman today. And yes, the 2025 recruiting cycle is still technically going on. We've been very focused on 2026. I guess I should say the coaching staff has been very focused on 2026 lately, and so we've been covering that as they gain commitments. But one more signee, Blake Robinet from All Saints High School, 6'3", 265 pounds, defensive lineman. He looks like an interior D lineman to me. That's what he played at All Saints. Now, you saw a little bit of position flex here and there, but for the most part, this is the guy that was locked up in, a 3 technique outside shoulder the guard, sometimes in a 1 technique, more of a nose guard type position. But he's an interior defensive lineman. I feel like he's going to have to add on some size and some mass to that frame to play this spot at the next level. But when you turn on the tape, the first thing that really stands out, he's got some quickness to him. He seems very adept at shooting gaps, getting across the face of an offensive lineman, winning that battle almost immediately by making things happen. He plays with a high motor, multiple clips where he's chasing down. There was a clip where he chased down a double pass and basically just blew it up by hitting the wide receiver who was either trying to throw it back to the quarterback or throw it down the field. Multiple clips where he's chasing down a quarterback, running around, making a play, chasing somebody down from behind, getting a sack. He's been very consistent in his high school career. He had 8 sacks this past season. As a junior, 45 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. As a sophomore, 35 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and a forced fumble. So 3 years it's TAPS football, but it's pretty high level at TAPS football. All Saints is one of the best programs at that level in the state of Texas. He was a consistent starter and was a really good player for that All Saints team. Had, between 6 and 8 sacks every season that he played significant snaps, which is good to see. TCU is by far his best offer. Other offers that he had on the table, so he was committed to UNLV before he decommitted and committed with TCU. But North Texas, Missouri State, Illinois State, UNLV. So this feels like an evaluation where it's a local guy that they like. They see some things that stand out to them. And it's really saying, hey, this is a dude we believe can be a contributor, could be a rotational piece on our defensive line in a couple of seasons. Now it's going to come down to strength and conditioning program, getting that right. Also, how quickly can he pick up on what they're doing from a scheme perspective? But he made plays at All Saints, and he was always in the backfield, showed some good strength. Frankly, watching the clips that I did, it was kind of hard. He was throwing guys back, and he did a nice job of reestablishing the line of scrimmage. But it was sort of hard to tell at times. Oftentimes, the O-linemen that he was going up against weren't playing with great leverage. And maybe that's, credit to Blake for staying low, firing off the ball, and winning those battles. But it was hard to tell, okay, is he just kind of ragdolling some weaker players, or is he really showing some great get-off? But I think at the snap of the ball, he did a really good job of getting in the backfield, shooting gaps, getting past that, initial lineman who was trying to get across his face, and very physical, good tackler, all the things that you would want. I'm not sure why he didn't sign early. He was the only commit from the class that didn't. But whatever was going on, they got it worked out, and now he's made it home. So congratulations to him, and really awesome to see that you're adding another player on the defensive line. I've said this before. I think this especially applies to offensive line, but on the D line too. It's a numbers game to a certain extent. I mean, you want to get guys that are highly rated. You want to get guys with great offer sheets, but you're also putting a lot of bodies in the room and saying, all right, who's going to emerge as the dude here, right? Like who are going to be the 2 or 3 players that show promise either as a rotational piece or as a true like centerpiece of this defensive line. And they made that a priority with this 2025 class. According to 247 Sports, it's ranked number 31 in the nation overall. Composite rank, which means they look at On3 and Rivals and ESPN, it's 24th in the country. And on the D-line, Chad Woodfork, I'm lumping in edge players into the defensive line category here. So I think Chad Woodfork's going to be more of a stand-up edge stud linebacker, but for the context of what we're doing, I'm lumping those edge players into this discussion. So Chad Woodfork, who's one of the highest rated commits out of this class, 4-star player from Summer Creek down in Humble. John Schobel, another edge player. John played linebacker at Columbus and also spent some time with his hand in the ground, so not sure where exactly he'll be. Floyd Guidry from Spring, Texas, interior defensive lineman. Brody Waitley, another, kind of interior D lineman, similar size to Blake, 6'4", 265. Keelan Abrams, stand-up outside linebacker. And then Blake Robinette signing today. So a big emphasis on getting that position group right. In the 2025 class as a whole, I think this is the best job that Sonny's done since he's been here. Of one, getting some highly rated players, but also putting together a class that just makes sense from a roster perspective. Andy Avalos and his defensive staff, they really hit the ground running once they got on campus in finding dudes that fit their scheme, putting more of an emphasis on athleticism on the outside, on the edge, and finding guys who can get after it and rush the passer. Terry Shelton is a 4-star wide receiver who is coming in with a lot of hype from Carrollton. Ed Small's another wide receiver that did some great things at Anderson High School in Austin. Micah Strickland was injured for a lot of his senior year, but 4-star prospect out of Brownsboro at corner, outstanding athlete. Jared Martin, who I didn't mention earlier, but he's part of that defensive line group, that edge linebacker group. John Schobel, Adam Schobel. This is a really good class. And I think there's a number of guys here that are going to be asked to be contributors early on. And that's significant because what you're banking on this season for TCU, if they're going to be successful, is continuity. But with that continuity, you need help from some immediate impact newcomers as well. And obviously you're going to do that in the transfer portal. That's what, guys like Jordan Dwyer are for at wide receiver. But along with that, you need freshmen who can step in and play right away. So good news that you at least have some guys with the body types of college players already. Chad Woodfork looks the part. Now, how quickly can you learn the scheme? How quickly can you get accustomed to college football and that lifestyle? I don't know. But he looks like he could play right away. And that's a good start when we're talking about who projects to be an immediate impact player with this team. But they add their final high school piece to this class, I believe. That's 30 players that have signed letters of intent. And, today was the second National Signing Day. Back in my day, there's only one National Signing Day, and I'm sure many of you were used to that. But now we got two, and December has really taken over as the main signing day for a lot of these players. So Blake was a dude who hadn't signed yet. He put pen to paper today, as well as many other players across the country. But he was the only TCU signee that faxed in his letter of intent today. One staff move that was announced yesterday. This is from Matt Zentz from 247. TCU is set to hire Colorado State's Brett Cumnock as an assistant director of player personnel. He previously worked at TCU in 2022. Before that, he was an Alabama grad, and he was a student manager for Bama, working with the team's QB. So assistant director of player personnel. Different programs have different responsibilities for that role. From what I can tell from reading tea leaves and kind of seeing on social media what the player personnel department does at TCU, there is a scouting wing, but a lot of these guys or gals are essentially trying to set the right vibes, might not be the right word, but it's they're trying to promote the program to recruits. So when they have a big event over the weekend, or if they have players come and visit, all the logistics of making sure guys get to see the game, get to be with the coaches, have some different fun events while they're on campus, and also like even down to what snacks they like. It's a pretty big business now trying to keep up with these high school kids and what they're interested in. And so I think Brett will help with that, along with maybe some scouting as well. Has some familiarity with the program and with Sonny Dykes being here in 2022. So welcome back to him as he steps into a new role with the team. When we come back, TCU men's basketball gets a victory, and the women, well, they fall to Kansas State. That's coming up next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Game time. If you want a ticket to the big game or whatever big event you have coming up, Gametime is the app to use. They'll give you the right price without the headaches. And with Gametime picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. They have curated deals that make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. They show you what your view is going to look like from your seat before you even hit buy. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and that's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app. Give it a try today. TCU men's basketball, they win their second game in a row, a 65-60 victory over West Virginia. Frogs now 5-6 in Big 12 conference play. West Virginia also 5-6. They came into that ball game with a 5-5 record. The biggest story from this one, Jamie Dixon gets his 500th win. And Jamie, I've given Jamie a hard time during his tenure at TCU at times. I know some fans are frustrated with sort of the constant plateau that it feels like TCU basketball is on. And this year, I don't even know if they'll get there. This doesn't feel like a tournament team unless they go on some kind of crazy run in the second half of conference play. But I do think it's worth noting he's done an incredible job getting TCU out of the abyss. When I was a student at TCU, I wondered many times if the basketball program would even be competitive, because it seemed like it was so far from that goal. And then Jamie came in year one. They went to the NIT, and they won it. And sort of hit the ground running after that. Has won a couple tournament games. Has made TCU into a place where they legitimately, compete and contend for an NCAA tournament berth in most years. Doesn't seem like it's the case this year, but they got off the mat tonight, got a victory over West Virginia. And I know Jamie's been around forever. Longevity is part of it, but also you don't get to 500 wins unless you're a good coach. And even though I have some qualms with him, that's still an incredible accomplishment. As far as the game itself, Frogs got off to a rough start in the first half, closed the first half on a 15-4 run, cut it to 1, led by as much as 11. In the second half, Vashawn Alette was breaking down the West Virginia press. David Punch had a huge dunk. Felt like they were going to run away with it at home. Well, then West Virginia goes on a 10-0 run, cuts it to 1. They eventually tie the game. However, when TCU needed a bucket, Alette got a big and one. He also got an offensive rebound and a putback off a Chase Posey miss. And they fended off West Virginia, got some stops when they had to, and got the job done. I said this on social media. This shouldn't be a big surprise. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you'll know that I was a big fan and defender of Damian Ball when he was here at TCU. I thought he kind of got a bad rap because he was sort of in the shadow of Mike Miles. And I'll admit, he would shoot you out of the game sometimes. The turnovers were frustrating. Aulette sort of feels like a similar player. Now, Ball turned into a really good player by the end of his career. And I think Aulette has that kind of potential. Right now, it's very inconsistent. And yes, you deal with the fact that he can potentially shoot you out of the ball game. But that confidence that he has, TCU needs it this year. Like with the young players that haven't become the contributors you would want so far, and the fact that Frankie Collins went down with an injury, there's been a need for somebody who can go score. And Noah Reynolds has stepped up in that department. Aulette has as well. Tonight, he had 22 points, 8 of 18 shooting, 6 of 7 from the free throw line. Also had 11 rebounds and 5 assists. So pretty good all-around game. But he's just one of those guys, like, when he's on, he feels it, and he gets the job done. And, yeah, he's going to throw up some wild shots. But I think you live with it, given the reward that he can bring to the table, because he can be a 20-plus a night type of dude when he's feeling it. Also defensively, like tonight, I thought he played good defense overall. He caused a few turnovers. He was pressuring the ball. The defensive effort is not always there. You can tell, and this is somewhat true for all hoopers, but when he's struggling offensively, it affects his defense. Because there'll be possessions where he just doesn't really give the full effort. But when he's playing well offensively, he also tends to lock in on that side of the ball too. And that's good to see. I mean, one of the reasons I like Ball was he was a lockdown defender. He was TCU's best on-ball defender in those years. He did a great job of on the perimeter making sure guys couldn't get easy buckets, along with the speed and the athleticism that he showed. So nice win. No Reynolds had 20. He had a good night. I feel like I wrote off Jace Posey too soon. Now, he's not – I mean, he played 16 minutes tonight, only 4 points. But he gives them quality minutes. And it feels like when they need a spark or when they need something, he comes up big. He took the ball to the rack tonight late in the game and got fouled and hit both free throws. I think good things happen when he's in the game. I'll put it that way. It doesn't always show up in the stat sheet, but I just feel that way watching him play. TCU Women, they fall to Kansas State 59-50, and they're now 9-2 in conference play. Kansas State, with that victory, takes over sole possession of first place in the league. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a bad loss. Now, Kansas State's a really good team. They're very good. Serena Sundell was fantastic tonight. It was on the road. It was a sellout. The atmosphere in Manhattan was great. Jeff Meady had a good plan against TCU. He pressured the ball. He trapped Haley Van Lith and TCU's guards relentlessly. And there wasn't really a let-up in it. I mean, it was all game long. They made it very tough for TCU just to get the ball past half court. And then once they were there, they forced him to execute. But Aoka Lee is Kansas State's best player. She was not available tonight. She's injured. This was a chance to go take control of the league, and they just couldn't do it. Got off to a rough start. Mark called a timeout, which is rare for him. Like, Mark Campbell really likes to let his teams play through those scenarios, but he called timeout early. But the first quarter, it's tied at 8 at the end of 1, and really just because of 2 threes that Robertson hit for TCU, that was the difference in what kept him in the game. Second quarter, TCU goes on a great run. They take a 25-19 lead into the locker room. And then Kansas State came out and really dominated the third quarter play. And the fourth, TCU goes on an 8-0 run to take a 1-point lead, and things unraveled from there. One thing that I took issue with tonight, I saw Mark, they would break that press or break that, three-quarter court trap. And he kept asking his guards to sort of pump the brakes. And I get, he was probably just trying to slow down the pace and maximize possessions and get good looks. But I kept saying, man, I feel like they need to, once they break that press, really push the ball and try to get some cheap points around the bucket. Because scoring in the half court was slow going. Way too many turnovers tonight. Just about every time TCU ran the pick and roll, they were blitzing the guards and throwing 2 defenders at them. And Sedona Prince was frequently open, but because of the way Kansas State was being so aggressive, the guards couldn't see over those defenders and make those passes. Just a rough loss. I mean, they can bounce back. You hope that Kansas State drops a game or two in the stretch run of games here at the end of the season. But, man, that was one I wish they could have found a way to win. It didn't happen. They fall 59-50. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. PrizePicks. If you've ever wondered what it's like to play daily fantasy sports, PrizePicks is a great way to jump in on the action. It's very simple. There's no better way to make the big game more exciting than with PrizePicks. It's the best place for daily fantasy sports. You just simply pick more or less on 2 different player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes needs to throw just 1 yard to win. So that's easy money. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Download it before the big game on Sunday. So yesterday I talked about the Big 12 schedule and TCU schedule specifically and how difficult it was. I did want to throw one note out there. I think it was Frog Fan that mentioned this. Maybe it was 2 days ago. But TCU baseball is going to be featured in the new MLB The Show game. MLB The Show apparently adding some college teams to their database this year. And in the preview for the new game, there's a TCU decal on the outfield wall. And it was confirmed, yes, TCU is going to be available there. So I haven't played video games in a long time. I'm kind of past that point in my life, even though my 8-year-old son might be bringing me back into it soon. But, yeah, might have to check that out because that's pretty cool. I don't think – was it MVP Baseball that had the college game years ago? I don't think I ever played that. But, yeah, I would be excited to see TCU baseball and MLB The Show. That's fun. And I guess when that comes out, if and when you guys buy it, let me know what the reviews are. As far as other reactions from yesterday's show, Richard Berry says the Big 12 needs to promote the rivalry between Baylor and TCU like the Red River Shootout. If it happens in the middle of the season, it could be a big game while the SEC is playing Mercer. Put the game on big noon kickoff. I think that's the thought process, is they don't want it to get buried in – because I've been pretty adamant over the past couple of days. I'd like to see that game during rivalry week where it should be. But, yeah, I understand your point. The Big 12 probably looks at it and says, you know what? We don't want it to get lost in Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, and all the big games that come with rivalry weekend. So you could do it in mid-October and promote it more. I just want to see it get back to being a big deal for both schools. And last year's game was great. A couple of years ago when TCU was on the crazy run and they hit that walk-off bazooka field goal at the buzzer, that was fantastic. It's been a good football game like pretty much every year, even when the teams have been kind of mid or one team's really good and one team's not. So, yes, promote it. Get the word out there that this is a really good game between two schools that don't get along. Matt Clark says, ouch, I'm seeing 6 wins next year. Man, I hope not. But, yeah, it is a tough schedule. I mean, you're not avoiding any of the heavy hitters, at least on paper right now in the Big 12. But we'll see. Matt George says, bye week the second week of the season. That's terrible. Playing North Carolina and then an FCS team followed by a bye week before SMU. I think that would have been better. Why does TCU always seem to get a lopsided schedule with the number of games in a row? It does feel that way. I will say, at least for me personally, I really only pay attention to, besides looking at the opponents, as far as bye weeks go, TCU is the only team that I really pay attention to. So I think it might feel lopsided just because we're locked into TCU. But, yeah, I get your point. It does feel like the bye weeks are not spread out well. And Off Track mentioned Sonny probably just wants to – because I said yesterday, why are they putting the bye week between the North Carolina and ACU games? Even though it's a short week, I feel like that's a game you should play and then get the bye week before SMU. But Off Track mentioned maybe he just wants the guys to be fresh for SMU. I think that was a thought process. Also, like, no disrespect to ACU. There is a world where you can play that game and that week you're really preparing for SMU. Like, even though you're playing ACU, you're preparing for SMU, and you're getting ready for that ball game. So they know what they're doing. 7 games in a row is going to be tough, though. And they're going to have to be ready to go. Hopefully, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, they're in good shape. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts.